there is an element of collaboration as we know it that is a personal trait. But beside that, there is also an element of how you can effectively manage business relationships for mutual benefit. Is the trait or is the effective relationship management framework more important to the delivery of value for major projects? Collaboration is a personal trait, ability and inclination of individuals to work effectively with others. Really, it's about how a person engages with others within a work environment to build joint outcomes and joint delivery. It's dependent on the individuals in their specific circumstances. It's circumstance dependent. Someone could be collaborative today, not collaborative tomorrow because of the circumstance. The definition of collaborative working from ISO 44001, the establishment of a systematic, intentional and an enduring system to manage business relationships formed by committed organisations to maximise joint performance and to achieve mutual objectives while creating additional value for all. This is an organisational management system that supports the development of enduring, collaborative, working cultural traits. We'll talk about those cultural traits in a little bit. Why do we care? We care because we live in an increasingly complex working environment, and it's in that environment that we're all tasked to deliver the projects that build the future. And I was having a really good conversation before about the fact that project managers, lawyers, and engineers working together actually build the future. And that's what these complex projects are. It's also that the initiators of major projects, the principals, the governments, the major organisations that are investing in the delivery of these projects are increasingly asking for a different way of doing business. I was having a discussion today with someone who actually gave me insight to a claims-based system where everybody is throwing claims in at each other cannot necessarily be a bad outcome for a project if the project is going fast, breaking things as it goes, delivering at the edge of the requirements. But most of our principals, our clients, want to have a greater certainty of outcome, a bit less variance driven by personal behaviours and personal interactions. Basically what it does, it just rewards lawyers. Therefore, that claims-based system is no longer what they're focusing on. They're trying to find a different way to actually be able to deliver these outcomes without all of that cost and energy devoted to dealing with all these claims. How organisations utilise and deploy their human resources is becoming more and more a point of commercial difference, because attracting good talent and then attracting the type of organisations that want to engage in deep and meaningful collaborations to deliver complex things is becoming harder and harder, because the lack of a common system or a common approach to manage that has become one of the things that is driving people out of certain professions, because they're dealing with claims, they're in high cortisol environments where they're being negatively stimulated every day by their job because they're constantly getting the feedback of contestation and aggression. So actually, it's a better way to work. I was going to put a whole layer of statements from departments and governments that said, we want collaboration, but I thought I'd just pull one out. The Department of Infrastructure's Principles for Partnership, they encourage improved collaboration between government and the construction industry. So one of their core principles is to encourage that collaboration. But what are they actually talking about when they talk about this collaboration? And how do they get the value of it? So what is required to meet the outcomes of major projects is the establishment of a systemic, intentional and enduring system for managing business relationships. And that's really what the Institute for Collaborative Working is all about, is building knowledge in how you manage effective business relationships for mutual value. This is about building a collaboration culture within your organization, or a trait of collaboration within your organization. Organizations have many cultural traits. They have a safety trait, or they have a innovation trait, or a quality trait. How do you actually build those cultural traits, and why would you want to build those traits? By building that culture, you are creating an enduring approach to how they do business. Therefore, you're creating greater certainty in what your outcome would be by engaging with that organization, or for management applying that organization to a particular project. Building that seeks a systemic approach, an intentional approach to how you manage the elements of your business that support and enable collaborative working within your workforce. So that's where it's really dependent not only on personal competencies, but on how those competencies are supported, enabled, and given effect to within your organization. We've all met this person. I believe she was my life's travel agent. Computer said no, couldn't go there. Applying the personal trait of collaboration, you can overcome computer says no. The person behind the desk can work with you to get around whatever the issue with the computer says no. But it's a very variable thing. And for large projects, that variability is a risk, because you don't know in what moment might the computer be dominant and the application of that personal trait trying to collaborate with you actually be suppressed. A lot of organizations, people fear that if they go against the organization's policies in any way, shape or form, that they won't be supported. So the actual system, the computer, the process has more power than the individual, the human being in the loop. There's also a sense of lack of agency, that they can step outside of their current role and look at the best outcome for the organization and then take personal ownership of trying to achieve that best outcome. There was a study done about this concept of diffused leadership within organizations, where individuals who feel empowered actually take a leadership role to solve a problem as it emerges. And that's the best place to solve that problem, because it hasn't escalated by the second and third order effects by delay in resolution, the angst that goes with uncertainty of your response, all of those sorts of things. Also, people that have personal preferences. You could walk in one day and that person just doesn't like the tie you're wearing or the cut of your jib, and they will apply their personal preferences over delivering the best outcome for the person in the moment. Also, there's this concept of the lack of a big picture, understanding the effect. I know there's been more than one experience with procurement officers or lawyers who come into a project with their perfect piece of advice that has no relevance to the circumstance the project's facing, and it is not helpful at all to resolving the issue. That goes to a lack of understanding or the lack of common goals. So how do we get the computer to say yes? How do we get the system to support that person, to enable them, to empower them, to basically get beyond that piece of policy that's in their way or that piece of process to actually resolving the overarching issue? It's really about building a framework that reflects the behavior you want them to show in every single encounter, writing the processes and systems and guidance, setting up the performance criteria and the incentives around the concepts of getting that person to say yes. And why would you want to do that? Well, you actually are creating less variation risk in your projects. When you look at a big complex project and the guy's standing at the top looking at how it's running and how it's achieving, this concept of variability and behavioral impact causes a risk of cost and delay, and escalation means money. So creating a dampener effect by trying to set her up with a system that supports her to be able to apply her personal traits of collaboration is good for the whole of the project. For complex projects, collaboration as a personal trait is essential, but it's not sufficient. In and of itself, it needs to be there, but being there just by itself is not going to get away from the person saying no. It's not going to get away from the variability of personal relationships causing issues in your project. It's only through the adoption of an effective business relationship management system that you can get to the conditions for success.